If dominion means controlling people, then answer this question. Why did Jesus, the one we call King, use his authority to serve, to heal, to teach, to restore, and finally to lay down his life? Look at that carefully. The King had power, but he did not use people. He used his power for people. That distinction is the foundation of everything we are going to learn. Ladies and gentlemen, the word authority creates two very different reactions. Some people hear authority and think of protection, direction, and order. Others hear it and remember intimidation. They remember a parent who crushed their voice, a supervisor who exploited their labor, or a spiritual leader who used God's name to demand personal loyalty. So write this down. Dominion is responsible stewardship. Domination is the misuse of power against people. Say it again. Dominion develops. Domination diminishes. Dominion protects responsibility. Domination protects the ruler's ego. Dominion asks, what has been entrusted to me? Domination asks, who must submit to me? You see the difference? Now, do not make the opposite mistake. Because authority has been abused, some people conclude that all authority is evil. No. A home without responsible leadership becomes unstable. An organization without accountability becomes confused. A community without order becomes vulnerable. Authority is necessary, but it must remain attached to purpose, character, and responsibility. Think about a hammer. In the hands of a builder, it helps construct a house. In the hands of an angry person, that same tool can destroy what it was designed to build. Is the hammer evil? No. The problem is purpose. A powerful thing used outside its purpose becomes dangerous. That is what happened to dominion. We confuse governing a domain with controlling a person. And that false definition injures everyone. It makes humble people afraid to accept responsibility because they do not want to become controlling. At the same time, it gives ambitious people religious language to justify control. One group abandons authority, the other abuses it. Both have misunderstood the assignment. Throughout this teaching, keep one question before you. Is this authority cultivating a domain or controlling a person? We are going to trace how authority becomes corrupted, examine how Jesus exercised it, and test it in homes, workplaces, churches, businesses, and public life. But first, we must return to the beginning. Before we decide what dominion permits, we must discover what God originally told humanity to govern. Go back to Genesis 1:26 and look carefully at the assignment. Let them have dominion. Dominion over what? The text names the earth, the fish, the birds, the animals, and the living environment. In other words, humanity was commissioned to govern creation, cultivate resources, multiply what is good, and establish productive order. Now listen carefully. The passage does not say let one human being own another human being. It does not authorize you to turn another person into your property, your instrument, or an extension of your ambition. Why? Because the person standing beside you bears the same divine image and shares the same human dignity. You missed it. We were given authority over a domain, not ownership of one another. Write this definition down. Dominion is responsibility joined to sufficient authority. It is the obligation and permission to develop, protect, organize, and improve something entrusted to you. Look at the garden. The provision was already present, but the garden still required human participation. It had to be tended. It had to be guarded. Its creatures had to be named. Its potential had to be organized, and its fruitfulness extended. God supplied the raw material. Humanity received the responsibility to cultivate it. Consider a tree. You can stand before it and say, I see wood, but someone with vision sees a table, a chair, a doorway, perhaps even a musical instrument. The furniture does not walk out of the tree and introduce itself. The possibility is hidden inside the resource, waiting for human imagination, skill, discipline, and work to release it. That is dominion. Your domain is the area where your gift develops resources and improves the lives of people. Write that down. Your gift is not permission to possess people. It is capacity to serve them. A musician masters an instrument, not the audience. A craftsperson masters material, not the customer. An entrepreneur masters a problem, not the employees. If you must crush another person's will to prove that you are powerful, you have left your domain and trespassed upon their dignity. Mastery is not mastery over people, and this assignment belongs to humanity. Male and female alike are entrusted with responsibility and bear the dignity of divine representation. Therefore, no husband, parent, pastor, employer, or ruler can honor God's image in himself while denying it in someone under his influence. You cannot claim sacred authority while treating sacred people as objects. So dominion is constructive. It takes what has been entrusted and makes it more fruitful. It protects what is vulnerable, organizes what is disordered, develops what is hidden, and serves people without stealing their agency. But here is the next question. Does receiving an assignment make you the absolute owner? No. Authority must come from somewhere, and it must answer to someone. To understand why dominion always carries accountability, we must now examine the source of legitimate authority. Imagine a company opens a branch in another country and appoints a manager. That manager has real authority. She can organize the staff, approve schedules, protect assets, and make decisions. But can she wake up one morning and announce, "This company belongs to me now. I have changed the mission, rewritten the standards, and transferred the money into my private account"? Of course not. Why? Because management is not ownership. Write this down. Delegation is not abdication. When an owner delegates authority, the owner does not surrender ownership. The representative receives permission to execute the mission within established limits. That is the architecture of legitimate authority. God entrusted the earth to humanity, but he did not cease to be king. Human beings govern the domain. God governs the human beings. Adam possessed authority, but he was never its source. His authority remained authentic only while it stayed aligned with its author. Look at those words: author, authority, authorization, authenticity. The author establishes the purpose, authority flows from that purpose, authorization permits the representative to act. Authenticity appears when the representative acts accurately. The moment the representative behaves as though he is the author, disorder begins. Now consider an ambassador. An ambassador may enter a room carrying the weight of an entire government. Yet that influence does not come from personal importance, loud speech, expensive clothing, or impressive charisma. It comes from accurate representation. An ambassador cannot invent national policy at breakfast because he is feeling creative. The moment he substitutes private desire for official purpose, he may still have the title, but he has compromised the authority behind it. That is why rights and responsibilities must never be separated. Authority gives you the right to act, but it also gives you the duty to answer. Answer for the result. Answer for the method. Answer for the resources. Answer for the people affected by your decisions. Many people want the right without the reckoning. They want the microphone without the review, the office without the oversight, the influence without the inspection. That is not authority. That is appetite wearing a title. The centurion who approached Jesus understood this structure. He described himself first as a man under authority and then as a man with others under him. Notice the order: under first, over second, discipline before command, alignment before influence. He understood that his words carried weight because he belonged to an established chain of responsibility. So whenever authority is exercised, ask 3 questions. Who authorized this action? What purpose was this authority given to serve? To whom will this leader give an account? Ask those questions in your home. Ask them in your workplace. Ask them in your church. Ask them of public officials and ask them of yourself. Healthy authority is authorized responsibility exercised within limits and answerable to a higher standard. Say it plainly. Authority without accountability becomes ownership in disguise. And when authority is separated from its source, its purpose, and its accountability, it does not simply vanish. It mutates. The manager begins acting like the owner, the ambassador begins inventing policy, and stewardship quietly becomes domination. Watch that branch manager again. At first, the manager serves the mission. The staff are developed, the money is protected, and the decisions are measured against the owner's purpose. Then something changes. The manager begins to say, my staff, my money, my branch, my rules. He still occupies the same office, but his relationship to the office has changed. Yesterday, he held the position as a trust. Today, the position has become his identity. Listen carefully. Domination rarely begins with a command. It begins when a steward forgets the purpose of the stewardship. The corruption follows a predictable path. First, purpose is forgotten. Second, accountability becomes irritating. Third, the position becomes personal identity. Fourth, people become tools. Finally, force must replace credibility. Why force? Because when people are no longer inspired by the mission, the insecure leader must pressure them to preserve the appearance of leadership. Write this down. Power is the capacity to produce an effect. Authority is the legitimate right to act for an assigned purpose. They are not the same. A thief with a weapon has power, but he has no authority. A parent may have enough strength to frighten a child, but strength does not make every action legitimate. Capacity without authorization is merely force. How do you recognize the counterfeit? Look at its methods. It uses fear to obtain compliance. It uses guilt to prevent questions. It uses secrecy to avoid examination. It uses threats to silence correction. And it demands loyalty to the leader, even when the leader has abandoned the purpose. Now, domination is not always loud. Sometimes it does not shout, "Do what I say." Sometimes it whispers, "If you loved me, you would do this." Sometimes it controls affection. Sometimes access. Sometimes approval. Sometimes money or opportunity. Sometimes it borrows spiritual language and says, "Do not question me. You are questioning God." No. God does not need manipulation to defend his authority. Do not confuse order with control. Order coordinates different people toward a shared purpose. Control attempts to possess their choices, identity, and dependence. Order helps people function. Control makes them afraid to function without permission. And before you use this teaching to examine everybody else, examine yourself. What happens when someone disagrees with you? Do you become defensive? Do you punish honest questions? Do you hide information that others need? Do you make every decision flow through you so the organization cannot survive without you? If everything collapses when you leave the room, perhaps you did not build leadership. Perhaps you built dependence. A title cannot cleanse a corrupt method. Neither father, pastor, chief executive, nor public servant can sanctify coercion, exploitation, or harm. Position may explain your responsibility. It never excuses the abuse of it. Here is the warning law. When a leader must diminish people to preserve authority, that authority has already lost its kingdom character. So do not judge leadership merely by its claims, its vocabulary, or the size of its platform. Judge it by its methods and its fruit. Does it cultivate a domain or control a person? And the best way to expose a counterfeit is to place it beside the genuine article. For that, we must look again at the king who possessed extraordinary authority, yet refused domination, Jesus. Now look at Jesus. Because the authentic always reveals the counterfeit. He is called king, yet he does not build greatness by placing everyone beneath his ego. He possesses authority, but his authority restores the sick, teaches the confused, confronts oppression, organizes provision, welcomes the overlooked, and develops ordinary people into responsible representatives. That is not domination. That is dominion in its proper form. Notice first his relationship with the Father. Jesus never presents independence as proof of strength. He explains that his words and works proceed from the one who sent him. Do you see the structure? He has authority because he remains under authority. His submission does not diminish him. It authorizes him. Write this down. Independence is not the highest expression of power. Alignment is. During his temptation, Jesus is offered access to earthly kingdoms through a corrupt method. He refuses. Why? Because kingdom authority is not seized through compromise. It is received through obedience. You do not become legitimate merely because you can obtain a position. The method by which you gain influence reveals the government you represent. Look at his ministry. When sickness appears, he restores people. When confusion appears, he teaches truth. When disorder appears, he confronts it. When a crowd needs food, he organizes what is available. When vulnerable people are pushed aside, he brings them near. And when his followers compete for status, he does not flatter their ambition. He corrects their definition of greatness. The rulers of the world may use rank to press people downward, he tells them, but it must not be that way among you. In his kingdom, greatness is measured by service. Now be careful. Service does not mean weakness. Service does not mean avoiding every conflict, agreeing with every opinion, or allowing disorder to spread because correction feels uncomfortable. Jesus corrected hypocrisy. He established boundaries. He issued commands. He confronted wrongdoing. Why could he be firm without becoming oppressive? Because his firmness served truth and restoration, not insecurity. A servant leader does not seek universal approval. A servant leader seeks the genuine good of those entrusted to his care. Then we arrive at the cross, and the entire meaning of authority is exposed. Domination sacrifices people to protect the leader's image. Jesus sacrifices himself for the people. Domination says, you must suffer so I can remain important. The cross says, I will bear the cost to restore what has been entrusted to me. You missed it. The crown is proven by the cost the king is willing to carry. And after the resurrection, Jesus declares that authority has been given to him, and then he sends his followers. Authority is established first. Assignment follows. He does not authorize them to build private empires. He commissions them to represent his character and extend his purposes. Repeat this. The higher the authority, the greater the responsibility to serve, protect, and answer for its use. That is kingdom authority strong enough to confront disorder, yet secure enough to serve without self-exaltation. But now we face a practical question. If legitimate leaders do not control people, how do they move people toward a common purpose? The answer is not force, it is influence. And genuine influence begins long before anyone receives a title. Leadership is not something you capture by collecting a title. Leadership is what people recognize after your purpose, vision, passion, and character begin affecting their decisions. The title may announce your office, but influence reveals whether you can lead. Write this chain down in order. Purpose produces conviction. Conviction clarifies vision. Vision awakens passion. Passion inspires participation. And inspiration permits influence. Do not reverse it. If you begin by pursuing influence before discovering purpose, you will need performance to keep people's attention. If you pursue followers before developing character, you will eventually use those followers to support an identity you have not built. Imagine two leaders assigned to the same struggling team. The first leader gathers everyone and says, here is the problem we were created to solve. Here is the future we can build together. I see abilities in this room that have not yet been developed, and my responsibility is to help those gifts become effective. People begin to see themselves inside the vision. Their work has meaning. Their contribution matters. The second leader enters and says, if this project fails, I know exactly whom to blame. If you disagree with me, perhaps you are not committed. And if you leave, do not expect another opportunity from me. Now both teams may appear busy. Both may meet a deadline. Both may produce visible compliance. But do not confuse similar activity with similar leadership. One group is contributing through conviction. The other is complying through fear. Listen carefully. Inspiration reveals purpose. Manipulation conceals motive. Inspiration says, your gift matters to this mission. Manipulation says, your insecurity is useful to my ambition. Inspiration strengthens agency. Manipulation weaponizes consequences. Inspiration produces partners. Manipulation manufactures dependence. This is why voluntary organizations offer such a powerful lesson. When you cannot guarantee participation through salary, rank, or force, the cause must draw people. The leader must communicate a future worth serving and demonstrate enough credibility that people willingly bring their time, skill, and energy. Nobody volunteers for confusion forever. They may love you, but eventually they will want to know where this bus is going and whether you possess a license. Now connect this to dominion. Vision is the ability to recognize what something could become and accept responsibility for cultivating it. A leader sees undeveloped capacity in a person, an organization, a neighborhood, or a resource and says, there is more here and I will help bring it forward. But passion alone is not proof of legitimacy. A manipulator may be passionate. A dictator may be energetic. Character must govern passion, and purpose must govern method. If the mission requires you to violate the dignity of the participants, your method has contradicted your message. So here is the test. After people encounter your leadership, do they become more capable, responsible, courageous, and purposeful? Or do they become more fearful, dependent, confused, and unsure of themselves? Write this final contrast down. Domination collects followers around a personality. Leadership integrates gifts around a purpose. Legitimate influence releases willing contribution because people understand the cause, recognize their place within it, and trust the character of the one carrying the vision. But this principle must pass a more intimate examination. It is easy to discuss leadership on a platform. The hardest place to inspect authority is inside your own character and inside the home, where titles are familiar, emotions run deep, and nobody is impressed by your resume. Proverbs gives us a striking picture. A person who cannot govern his own spirit is like a city with broken walls. Everything can enter. Anger enters. Appetite enters. Pride enters. Impulse enters. And whatever enters can take control. Listen carefully. Your first territory is not your company, your congregation, or your family. Your first territory is yourself. Self-government precedes external authority. If you demand discipline from others while excusing disorder in yourself, you are asking your position to hide your immaturity. You want everybody to arrive on time, but you do not keep your promises. You demand respect, but your speech is reckless. You insist on accountability, but correction makes you angry. So examine yourself. How do you respond when criticized? What promises do you keep when nobody is watching? How do you manage money, time, appetite, and opportunity? Can you apologize without adding an excuse? When someone corrects you, do you listen or begin preparing a speech about their faults? Write this down. The person who cannot receive correction is not ready to exercise authority. Now bring this principle into marriage. Marriage is not ownership. It is shared stewardship of a covenant, a household, resources, responsibilities, and a future. One spouse does not receive permission to erase the other's voice, gift, conscience, or dignity. You are not building a kingdom around one personality. You are cultivating a life entrusted to both of you. Consider two homes. In one, everybody studies the mood of the most powerful person. Truth is dangerous. Questions are treated as rebellion. Peace means nobody has upset the controller. In the other home, responsibilities are clear. Promises matter. Disagreement can be honest. And correction moves in both directions. People speak truth because dignity is protected. That home may have difficult conversations. Oh, yes, but silence is not mistaken for unity. Fear can make a house quiet. Only trust can make it whole. The same principle applies to parenting. Children need protection, instruction, boundaries, and order. But children are developing persons, not private property. Your assignment is not to manufacture a smaller version of yourself. Your assignment is to cultivate character, wisdom, responsibility, and the ability to make sound decisions. That means discipline and humiliation are not the same. Discipline says, this action has consequences, and I will help you learn self-government. Humiliation says, your mistake injured my ego, so I will injure your dignity. One develops judgment, the other develops fear. Healthy parental authority must also change as the child develops. When children are young, they require close direction. As maturity grows, guidance should increasingly make room for responsible choice. If your authority succeeds only while your child remains helpless, it has failed its purpose. The goal is not permanent dependence. The goal is mature freedom governed by character. And let us make the boundary unmistakable. No religious phrase, family title, or appeal to honor can transform intimidation, exploitation, coercion, or abuse into legitimate authority. Calling domination love does not make it love. Calling fear respect does not make it respect. A sacred title cannot purify an abusive method. Now inspect the emotional climate around you. Can the people closest to you tell the truth? Can they ask a question without being punished? Can they develop gifts you did not choose? Can they disagree respectfully, admit failure, and accept responsibility? Or must everyone become smaller so you can feel larger? Repeat this. Authority succeeds when the people entrusted to it become capable of governing themselves. Kingdom authority begins with disciplined character and proves itself at home by cultivating dignity, truth, responsibility, and maturity. And what is formed inside the home does not remain there. It enters offices, churches, businesses, and governments. So now we must apply the same standard wherever authority becomes institutional. Every institution has four things: a domain, a purpose, entrusted resources, and people whose gifts must be developed. Never confuse the last two. People are not raw material. They are participants who carry dignity, intelligence, creativity, and purpose of their own. Begin with business. An entrepreneur exercises dominion by identifying a problem, mastering a gift, developing resources, and creating something useful. The entrepreneur sees possibility where others see only limitation. But vision becomes leadership only when it organizes people around a credible purpose and allows their gifts to contribute. Profit is necessary for a business to remain healthy, but profit cannot make every method legitimate. Growth does not excuse deception. Efficiency does not justify fear. Productivity does not permit you to waste talent or treat workers as disposable machinery. Write this down. If your enterprise creates value while destroying people, it has misunderstood value. A good manager clarifies the mission, distributes responsibility, develops competence, and welcomes truthful information even when that information is uncomfortable. Accountability must move in both directions. Employees answer for their work, and leaders answer for the conditions, decisions, and systems they create. Some managers say, "Nobody around here takes responsibility." Yet they approve every decision, punish every mistake, and reject every suggestion. Well, what did you expect? You trained the entire organization to wait for you. Delegation without development creates failure. Control without trust creates paralysis. Now enter the church. Spiritual authority exists to equip people for mature service, not to make them permanently dependent upon a personality. A pastor is not the owner of another person's access to God. A pulpit is not a throne for private ambition. Teaching should produce understanding, character, responsibility, and service. If questions are silenced to protect an image, if correction is called disloyalty, or if people are taught that leaving one leader means leaving God, something has moved from stewardship into domination. Remember the ambassador. Whether preacher, executive, founder, or public official, a representative loses credibility when personal appetite replaces the purpose of the authority represented. An ambassador's strength is accuracy. The office is not permission to improvise a private kingdom. The same law governs public leadership. Civic power is entrusted for social order, justice, protection, and human flourishing. It is not private property to distribute among friends, defend personal status, or silence public scrutiny. Public authority becomes corrupt when the official begins treating the nation as the branch manager treated the company. My resources, my people, my rules. No. The greater the public trust, the greater the public account. That is why transparency, correction, limits, and distributed responsibility do not weaken authentic authority. They protect it. A bridge has guardrails because the destination matters. Accountability is a guardrail that keeps power aligned with purpose. So, ask these four questions wherever authority operates. What was entrusted here? Whom should it benefit? What should it become? And how will the leader answer for the result? Ask them in the boardroom. Ask them in the pulpit. Ask them at City Hall. Ask them in your own office. Different institutions carry different powers and responsibilities, but every legitimate office exists to serve a purpose larger than its holder. That is the common thread. Now we can bring the entire teaching into one final framework. 5 tests that can expose domination and confirm healthy authority in any home, organization, church, business, or nation. We began with a question. If dominion means controlling people, why did Jesus the King refuse to dominate? Now we can answer it. Dominion was never permission to possess people. Dominion is the responsibility to represent the king within an entrusted domain. It develops resources, establishes order, protects dignity, and releases purpose. So write down these 5 tests, but listen carefully. Do not use them first as a weapon against your spouse, pastor, employer, or president. Apply them to yourself. Test number 1 is development. Does your authority help people discover their gifts, increase their competence, mature in judgment, and exercise responsible freedom? Or does it keep them weak enough to remain dependent upon you? Test number 2 is dignity. Do you treat people as participants who bear God's image, or as objects to be used, frightened, silenced, and discarded? You cannot honor the Creator while degrading what bears His image. Test number 3 is order. Does your leadership turn confusion into purposeful coordination and fruitful stewardship? Or do you call it peace simply because nobody dares to disagree? Silence is not always order. Sometimes silence is fear holding its breath. Test number 4 is accountability. Can you receive correction? Do you respect limits? Are you transparent about responsibility? Are you under authority, or do you believe your position has exempted you from the standards you enforce? Remember this: anyone who is too important to be corrected is too dangerous to be trusted. Test number 5 is larger purpose. Does your authority serve a mission beyond your comfort, wealth, reputation, and control? Or has the mission quietly become a machine for maintaining your importance? Development, dignity, order, accountability, purpose. Repeat them until you can carry them into every room. Now conduct the audit. Examine your character. Examine your home. Examine your workplace, church, business, and civic influence. Identify one domain you have neglected because responsibility frightened you. Then identify one relationship where you have confused leadership with control. Do not stop with recognition. Write the 5 tests. Examine one recurring behavior. Invite honest feedback from someone mature enough to tell you the truth. Correct one manipulative practice. Then establish one concrete structure of accountability so good intentions become disciplined action. If your authority has injured someone's dignity, do not defend your title. Apologize. Repair what you can. Change leadership begins when pride stops negotiating with truth. And if you have abandoned legitimate responsibility because you feared appearing controlling, return to your assignment. Humility is not neglect. Service is not passivity. The garden still requires cultivation. Teach these tests to your family. Carry them to your staff. Discuss them with your congregation, team, or community. A principle becomes culture when people can recognize it, repeat it, and hold one another accountable to it. So here is the final decision. Stop surrendering the responsibility genuinely entrusted to you, and stop using responsibility as permission to control others. You were created to master your gift, manage your domain, serve people, and remain accountable to the King. That is dominion without domination.